killing, and you said that after that there seems to be a lot of sympathy for extremism, and that you realised that Pakistan really has a problem with extremism. And my question is really that how much do you think that really is the case, that you can, Pakistan as a whole has a problem with extremism, or do you think really it's the way, because the extremists, people who were sympathetic, had more media coverage and were overrepresented in the media?
It wasn't overrepresentation in the media. As I said, I had work colleagues who have good jobs, they had money. They were saying it was a good thing. He was meddling. He shouldn't ever challenge this law. He should never have called it a black law. I had friends on Facebook who were celebrating the entire country's death. It wasn't overblown by the media. If anything, I think it was underreported.
Do you think the reason for that is because people really believe in what the extremist groups say, or do you think it's our fear, or why do you think that is?
Unfortunately, I think that as I said, I don't think it's an economic problem. The economics plays a part, as I said. I don't think it's any a political problem anymore. Obviously, politics and drone attacks and stuff kind of play a part. I think it has now become a cultural problem. And it is across all economic stratas, socio-economic groups. And that is what's truly worrying, that you can't have a rational discussion about the fact that, here was a man gunned down, shot in the back by his guard, because he happened to challenge a law created by the British. And because it's a blasphemy law, and because it was misconstrued and it was spun by a very right-wing, very dangerous media, that he was challenging Islam. He wasn't. And this is what's very worrying about the state of Pakistan.
Yeah. John, I share some of your pessimism, but my menopausal years allow me the liberty of being a bit optimistic, and also my own training as an historian. I think Pakistan is at the crossroads. I mean, most of the time it has been at the crossroads.
One thing I'd like to say,
yeah.
I am terribly pessimistic, but the one thing you've got to give Pakistan is that it's the most resilient country on earth.
Exactly.
And it has this amazing capacity to bounce back. We always say that, it is a country that's on the precipice of becoming a failed state and so on, and yet it somehow survives.
Yeah, so what I was trying to suggest is that I have no suspicion about fellow Baluchi or Pashtun tribal countrymen and countrywomen, but most of the people in Pakistan live in the Indus Valley. That accounts for about 70% of Pakistan's population, all the way from the north to the delta. I mean, these are people who suffered some of the worst floods in recent given time. And there is a kind of consensus. I write books on Pakistan, I travel, walk around, meet ordinary people. I think whether you could say it's a syllabus or it's a kind of this uniform historical narrative that they absorb, or it's the media, or maybe these are the stakeholders. I think there is a consensus on having a Pakistan, a country. But what kind of Pakistan? That is where the dispute is ongoing.
Oh, I agree with that. I think there's sometimes we're in this together.
Yes.
We have nowhere else to go. And very much at the moment there is a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Sense that because Pakistan is increasingly isolated within the international community and also within the regional community, there is that sense of, well, we're all we have, we're in this together. But the idea that there still isn't an idea of, well, what does that mean? What are we? Where do we go from here? What are we going to be as a country in the 21st century? That, I think, is lacking. So there is a sense of well, no one else is going to take it.
So sense of plurality. I mean, these ethnicities are problematic, and governments and the leaders have not been able to resolve them. They could have worked towards a lot in the interest of Pakistan. For example, when we talk of Balochistan, we forget that there are more Balochis living in just one area of Karachi, Liari, than the entire province of Balochistan. It's Karachi, which is the largest Pathan city. It's not Peshawar, it's not Bani, it's not Multan. And so, in other words, over the last 30, 40 years, this pluralism has been percolating. Maybe something new hasn't come up yet, but it's not clear-cut territorially divided. I think that's what I'm saying. People have become stakeholders without acknowledging it.
But you see, culturally, I mean, if you look at the 5 major ethnic groups in Pakistan, name another country where your 5 or your ethnic groups have stronger brethren ties with 3 other countries. Whether your Punjabis, your Mahajis and your Sindhis have brethren ties with India, your Pathans have ties with Afghanistan, and your Balochis with Iran.
That doesn't worry me, because there are more Pathans on Pakistani side than in Afghanistan. And the way Americans and 37 NATO states have
you've seen that culturally they have a stronger affiliation with than with. I've seen it. Yeah. You're shaking your head.
Are you saying a Punjabi would associate more with India than saying he's Pakistani?
No, not Punjab, but Pathan would have a stronger affinity with the Pathan in
but they were supporting the military operation in Sabah and Multan.
If it came to like the
I think you're making very broad generalizations.
Well, I'm allowed to make whatever generalization I want. You can stop me.
Okay, go on.
Coming back to your topic about conspiracy theories, and I'm sure Fulton are full of them, but can I just ask your advice or your views on GEO? Because one thing people hear on the ground here, that GEO is an American funded channel or an Indian funded channel. Is there any experience of GEO as an employer?
Well, I was obviously working there on behalf of MI6. I went on Capital Talk with Hamid Mir and Sheikh Rashid was a guest, and he asked me, you've been all around Pakistan, and you spy, and you the name is Fulton, George Fulton. I said, no, I'm not good looking enough to be a spy. But no, I mean, obviously, I think, well, for a fact, I know America does have some influence within some of the Pakistani media. For example, I know that they've just, obviously, the Voice of America program that was coming on, and it was interesting, that was allowed to be broadcast on GEO in Pakistan, but it wasn't allowed to be broadcast on GEO USA, which was propaganda, and America has very strict rules on propaganda being broadcast into its own country. And obviously, I mean, I don't want to play into any conspiracy theories, but obviously Ibrahim Rahman went to the Kennedy School, and very much after he returned, he took off more of the sort of right-wing, nutjob, anti-American anglers such as Shahid Massoud, Amir Yaqub, and he brought in people like Najib Razak and people who had a more liberal, progressive bent towards their outlook. I know for a fact that, for example, an NGO in the USA is funding a bureau for, I think it's Express and Dunya in America. So they are funding the correspondence working out there. So any news coming out of America will be funded by an American NGO. So that's problematic. That's a conflict of interest. How influential America is, I don't really think it's that influential, because there is still a lot of anti-American rhetoric on Pakistani television. So I don't think they're winning if there is a conspiracy. If they are controlling, they're not doing a very good job.
My other follow-up question is, this might have happened when you were there. I saw pictures that the police attacked GEO offices or GEO. This is all sort of.
Yeah, I was there actually.
What was going on in that situation when the law enforcement agency is causing havoc and chaos?
That's not necessarily unknown. I mean, I think GEO had aired some report that was antagonistic to some to the police, and they decided to attack. I remember OUPaksoc had done an article online where Shia and Sunni were debating, and that kicked off a huge riot that decided to throw stones and attack the GEO offices. So they were fairly common in Pakistan.
Yeah, so going back to some of the earlier questions about India. So India has many of the same problems that Pakistan is facing. They have more ethnic groups than there are in Pakistan, and they speak more languages than the rest of the world put together. And yet they're able to be united as Indians. So what do you think India has that Pakistan does not have? And secondly, what do you think we as Pakistanis should do to correct that?
Well, I think, ironically, firstly, I think the advantage that India had is that they had at the same time that they had Nehru living for 17 years after the creation of, or after independence. Within a year of Pakistan's creation, Jinnah was dead, so the sort of father of the nation and guiding light wasn't there to really create his vision for the country, I think. Secondly, it very early on embraced its pluralism. Pakistan is still very much Punjab dominated. You look at the anchors, you look at the media, it's still pretty Punjab dominated. There is a Punjabi chauvinism that is very apparent. I'm sorry to all my Punjabi friends in the room. A mentality sort of that you see in it's very subtle in the likes of people like Talat Hussain, its army, it's a particular mindset and they are the sort of beating heart of Pakistan, but that's not a vision that's shared by the other regions and the other ethnic groups. And as Punjab holds on tighter and tighter, it actually it acts as a catalyst for the increasing fragmentation of the country. And that is why it's very dangerous that the makeup of the army is so Punjabi-centric, and that it's 70% Punjabi, really, with a bit of Pathan blood as well. So I think if we devolve power to, and they're talking about it, there's been a recent discussion about increasing the number of provinces in Pakistan. If they do that, and if they actually give real power to the regions, then we might see a stronger Pakistan. So,
I've got a question on a much lighter note.
Sure.
You mentioned when you were younger, your parents took you on a journey.
No, they didn't take me. They went on the journey.
Oh, they went.
Yeah.
And I was just curious to know when you and Kieran will be taking Fairs back to Pakistan.
Well, Fairs and Kieran are in Pakistan at the moment. The day that it was a very bizarre day. I woke up on Monday with my mother-in-law barging into my room. Osama is dead. And then 2 hours later, we got a phone call from the visa, from Jerry's, saying Kieran's visa has come through, because we've been waiting for months for Kieran's visa to arrive. So Kieran and Fez are still there, so they'll hopefully be joining me in England on the 17th. And Fez was named after Fez Ahmed Fez. But he will be brought up as a proud British Pakistani. I'm sure he will go back, and I'll take him, hopefully I can take him around the whole of the country when he's an age to appreciate it.
Yeah.
I hope there is the stability and security there for me to do that.
Definitely. Thank you.
Richard?
Hi, George. My question has an underlying assumption to it. Hopefully, you'll be able to shed some light on it. Since you've been very close in the Pakistani media, and you've been there for a long time as well, I was wondering, do you know if when some of these television channels or the media, if they have some interest in the northern areas of Pakistan, which is Gilgit and Baltistan, and what the status is, and what the reason I'm asking is because I belong to that region, and it seems that nothing ever comes out, and we kind of don't exist on even in the map. Or
You don't?
like it's
Unfortunately, Gilgit and Humza and places, it's funny, it's absolutely ignored by the Pakistani media. I mean, we're fairly urban-centric, as well as obviously Fatah and the sexy terrorist areas. But it's basically, I mean, there are obviously regional channels, but the OUPaksoc world, which is beautiful, by the way, and one of my favourite parts of Pakistan, is woefully ignored, unfortunately. But
do you think there's an